When I was 16, I went on a camping trip in the Colorado River near Blythe. We didn't use the government campsite. We decided to camp out back in the Three Fingers Lake area, which is just a series of backwaters and canals. So, we arrived there mid-afternoon. It was mid-September, and the sun was blazing. We found a spot that was a bit secluded. The tents got set up, and my brother and I proceeded to go out in search of wood from the nearby willow trees. While collecting wood, I came across a series of hoof prints in the mud, as well as marks of something either sleeping there or at least bedding down in the spot from time to time. I made the assumption that it was a deer or something similar. I had seen the things along the river on other trips. We got a small fire going while we still had light, and set out a few fishing poles to try our luck while my uncle started up dinner. It was while dinner was cooking that I thought I heard something go into the far side of the canal farther downstream, and come back out on our side. I could tell this was something big. I turned to my brother, and he didn't think anything of it. My dad thought it was a beaver. By now, dinner was cooked, so we ate and set out to do some night fishing. All four of us, Dad, brother, uncle, and I, were focused intently on our fishing rods. I kept having a strange feeling that we were being watched by someone. My uncle kept telling me that I was just creeping myself out. At around midnight, we all decided to retire. We threw a few more logs onto the fire to keep some coals going, and then climbed into our tents. I decided to sleep in my own tent since I had one. My dad had set up his big 6-man tent, so the three of them shared it. I had set up my tent on a nice, flat, and sandy section of dirt, so no rocks under me. I had foam padding and 2 sleeping bags under me, so I was comfy. As I started to drift off to sleep, I heard something crossing the canal again. Everyone else was passed out hard, and I could hear them snoring loudly. Already wary, I flipped onto my stomach and looked out into the dark through the little mesh opening in the tent. All I could see was some dark shape emerge from the slope of the bank. It wandered about on the edge of the light. I could hear it sniffing around. The sound of hooves on the ground made me think deer, but then its shape came just within sight to make out a form against the dark sky. It was on 2 legs. I scrunched down into my tent and stopped moving. My mind raced, trying to decide on what I saw and what I was hearing. I convinced myself it was just a deer sniffing around and that I must be confused. The sounds of the thing faded away after what seemed like hours. I laid there, straining to hear any more noise. All I could hear was the sound of insects and the occasional bullfrog. Finally, I was able to get some sleep. I was awoken after dawn. Breakfast was already made, coffee and soda waiting, whatever I wanted, really. I stumbled out, ate my breakfast, and started asking everyone if they heard anything last night. None of them had. After changing, and while the heat was still at bay, I walked over to where I had seen the creature. Numerous hoof marks littered the dirt. I followed them over to where we had found all the wood. There were clear signs that something had returned to the spot. Soil had been churned up. I walked back to the campsite, trying not to think about it. We spent the day swimming in the canal. Something in the back of my mind kept telling me that whatever I saw last night was still around, watching us. That evening, it was my turn to cook. I set up some burgers to cook over the fire while everyone else was going about their business. As I was about to pull the burgers off the fire, my uncle came running from the willow patch. He started saying there was some weird stuff going on back there. I put the burgers aside and we all followed him. Farther back in the willow trees, there was what looked like some sort of altar. It was constructed of river stones, and on it sat a half-eaten fish and all sorts of smashed bones. Little reed-tied shapes sat around it, like voodoo dolls made from twigs. We all made our way out, talking about how creeped out we were. My dad and uncle agreed that it was probably some pagan altar or something, because it was hidden. They both agreed that that would be the last night we stayed. That night, we kept the fire big until we went to bed. The whole time, I kept eyeing the way to the willow patch. As I lay there, I heard the thing cross the canal again. I could hear the hooves once more. It circled to the far side of the camp. Once it got to the willow trees, I lost track of it. I strained to hear anything for a long time. I was certain that the others were awake and doing the same. Then, we heard the most horrible sound erupt from the grove. It was a scream, like someone being murdered, but it had a braying quality to it. I was terrified. I clutched my camp shovel, knowing that something was out there. From the other tent, I heard my dad and uncle emerge. I heard my dad tell my brother to stay in the tent, and they both went to the car. I heard my dad talking about getting their guns just in case. My father and uncle always brought pistols with them when we went camping. You never know what kind of animal or crazy person might show up. They both walked off into the dark towards the willow trees. Things were deadly silent. No insects. Nothing. But a dull breeze. Then I heard 2 gunshots, followed by another horrible, gargled scream. I heard the 2 come running back full speed to the camp. They started screaming at us to get into the car. My brother and I came out of the tents, and my dad screamed at us, "Get in the car now! Get in the car!" They both had their pistols in hand, and headed straight for the car. We all got in. He started it and began tearing down the dirt road. He started saying that they saw something back there. My uncle was white, and he told us we'd be back for our stuff later. My dad didn't stop until we reached Blythe. He got on his cell phone and called the police. The police thought he had shot a homeless man camped out at the river. We headed back in. By the time we had returned to the campsite, it was dawn. The tents were torn down and everything was tossed about. Fishing rods busted, camp table in several pieces. The police searched the area, found the altar, and told us we most likely shot at some teens who were out doing their devil worshipping. There was no blood, but hoof prints everywhere. The police told us to clean everything up and that we should probably leave. We cleaned the site up, gathering the now mostly ruined gear. As I rolled up my tent, I felt something hit my back. I looked down at the ground and saw one of the wooden figures from the altar in the willows. I looked around in time to see something recede into the reeds. followed by the splashing in the canal. We finished packing everything up and left. We haven't been back since. My dad, brother, and uncle still talk about it, and we all refuse to return to camp near Blythe.